Over 71 million Americans currently receive Social Security, and they, along with anyone who ever hopes to retire, are in major trouble because according to the government, by 2034, the Social Security Fund will be depleted. And when that happens, it will result in millions of Americans going bankrupt. But this is only the beginning of the problem because Social Security isn't just an economic issue, it's a looming crisis that, if left unresolved, will begin a generational war that pits sons against fathers in a battle for money where everyone loses. Here's why. Over 183 million Americans are paying on average over $3,000 a year into Social Security, with the promise that one day they'll get that money back. But it doesn't actually work that way, because the money that today's workers are paying into Social Security isn't being held for them. It's almost immediately being used to cut Social Security checks to today's retired Americans. And this has happened before. Today's retirees paid into Social Security over their careers, but that money wasn't held for them. It was used to finance their parents' retirements. So the system functions as a kicking the can down the road sort of issue, where the next generation is always expected to pay for their parents' generation to be able to retire, which has led to many young working Americans starting to lose faith in this entire system. And as we'll see later in this video, that concern is absolutely warranted. But it doesn't stop there, because a growing sect of current workers are starting to realize something that many consider to be truly insidious about this whole program. It functions like a wealth redistribution tax, where the government takes money from working Americans who are largely struggling to pay for a house or to get their student loans taken care of, and the government then takes that money and gives it to the wealthiest generation in human history. But on the other hand, most retirees need Social Security to get by. While it's technically true that the average American aged 65 to 74 is worth $1.8 million, this fact is beyond misleading, because the median net worth for someone in this age bracket is a relatively modest $400,000, and even that figure is inflated because it usually means that a retiree has a house that they can't really use for anything besides living in, or a retirement account that's rapidly dwindling. So a shockingly large number of today's retirees are living Social Security check to Social Security check, and if they didn't have that money, a shocking amount of Americans would be destitute, which means that Social Security has created a system that pits the young against the old, where everyone needs the same money and everyone is just struggling to get by. So the question is, how do we fix this? But to answer that question, and we will answer it, we first have to understand how we've tried to solve it in the past, because previous solutions clearly didn't work. And if we're going to fix it for good today, we need to avoid making the same mistakes that past generations made when addressing this issue. Social Security comes to us from a time where America was still reeling from the Great Depression, and the government was doing whatever it could to prevent more people from becoming homeless. The plan was simple. The government would introduce a new income tax, which, by the way, was still a new concept in the United States. But this tax would be special. Instead of going to the general operating budget of the government, any money collected from it would go into a separate pot called the Social Security Fund, which would then be used to make pension-style payments to people who retired. And the system worked, at least for a time, until the baby boom began. You see, after World War II, the population started to rapidly increase. In theory, this was great for the program. It meant that there was more workers contributing relative to the number of people retiring, and this allowed the government to expand the program. At least that's what they chose to do, instead of recognizing that this would create problems. They just expanded who all could receive benefits. And everything was great. Until the 70s, when the baby boom ended and population growth didn't just fall, it plummeted. At this point, it became clear that unless something was done, eventually the baby boomers would retire and there would be a massive social security crisis in the country. But at this point, it was too late to easily fix it because the government recognized that people had been contributing to Social Security for decades, and to end the program at this point would require a massive political battle and would honestly be morally unacceptable. So instead, the government started to introduce band-aid-like solutions, just quick fixes instead of actually solving the root problem. To begin with, in 1977, President Carter and Congress decided to increase the tax rate on Social Security so that they could increase the common fund. Beyond that, 6 years later, President Reagan and a new Congress went as far as to increase the retirement age from 65 to 67 in an effort to offset the ratio of workers to retirees. But neither of these solutions were permanent. And that's how we got to where we are today, because the true issue facing Social Security is a ratio issue. The program only works when there are far more people working than retired, and that's no longer the case. To give you a context for how bad this problem is, in 1960, there were 5.1 workers for every retiree. Today, there are less than 3 workers for every retiree, and the ratio is becoming worse, which is why Social Security is on the fast track to insolvency in less than a decade. This, of course, explains why so many Generation Z and millennials are becoming so antagonistic toward this whole system. The likelihood that they will get anything back from Social Security is far less likely than if they had just been born a few decades prior. And this comes to us at a time where people are struggling because despite GDP growth, real wages and advancement opportunities have largely become stagnant. But on the other side of the spectrum, most retirees deserve this money. After all, they contributed over the course of their careers into Social Security, and already in their lifetimes, they were told by the government that they would have to wait later to retire than their parents were able to retire, and have been constantly having to worry about what would happen to this whole system, which explains why everyone needs the same money. But now, understanding how we got here, it's time that we go back to the question from earlier in this video. How do we fix this? We only have 9 years until Social Security Fund runs out, so we need to act fast if we're going to prevent this whole system from collapsing. We have 5 options ahead of us that could make a meaningful difference in this issue. All 5 are painful. Some hurt workers, some hurt retirees, some hurt the entire nation's future. But if we don't make a decision and act on it soon, then in 5 years, we won't be left making a choice of which of these is the least painful. We'll be choosing which 2 options we want to adopt. I'm going to share all 5 choices with you, and then I'm going to give you my opinion on what we ought to do. Please let me know in the comments below what you think, or if I missed any choice that you think would help actually make a big difference. Option 1 is as simple as it is unpopular. We could raise taxes. Currently, the tax rate for Social Security is 6.2%. If we raise that to 7%, we buy years of additional runway. If we raise it to 8%, we might buy indefinite runway. Although, of course, more taxes disproportionately is going to hurt current workers who are struggling as it is. Option 2 is another choice that's going to hurt the current generation of workers. We could just raise the minimum retirement age. This worked in the 80s to buy us decades of additional time along with raising taxes, but this option is fundamentally distasteful to many because it revolves around calculating people's death. You see, every year we push people off from retiring is a year we don't have to pay out retirement, and this adds up rapidly. But again, this hurts current workers as they're the ones who are already being asked to foot a bill for something they're worried they're never going to get, and this massively would increase the number of people who never will get $1 back from the program because they could just die before they get to the new retirement age. Option 3 is a different style of approach altogether. Instead of disproportionately hurting current workers, we could try and spread out the harm to everyone in this issue. If we just reduced Social Security payouts by approximately 20%, we would see the program become solvent again in 2034, and everyone would be hurt. But specifically, an under-discussed demographic that would be really hurt are the people who are already living Social Security check to Social Security check. For these people, if you tell them that they're suddenly going to see 20% of their income go away, many of them would not know how to survive. Option 4 would be a completely different approach. You see, I haven't yet mentioned it in this video, but you only actually pay Social Security tax every year up until you make $168,600. After that, any additional income has a 0% Social Security tax rate. So if we were willing to remove the limit on how much people pay in taxes for Social Security a year, we would actually end up bringing in massive amounts of money. The Congressional Budget Office estimated that this would result in somewhere between $1.2 and $1.4 trillion of savings over the next decade. Obviously, this would go a long way, but we have to mention there are 2 reasons why people don't pay additional Social Security taxes beyond $168,000 as it is. The first reason is because these people already are paying at the highest income tax brackets, meaning already they're paying more in taxes than the vast majority of Americans. And secondarily, Social Security benefits are determined in part based on your income. So if someone has already made a fortune over their lifetime and is economically well off, the likelihood that they get anything out of Social Security rapidly diminishes, meaning that we would be asking the wealthy to subsidize the retirements of people who don't have a lot of money, which is absolutely an upshot that some people are willing to make, but it has to be noted that there is a reason this limit exists in the first place. The 5th option is the most radical. We could just get rid of Social Security altogether. Though, to be clear, we would need to do this gradually, as trying to just do it overnight would bring the issues we're trying to prevent happening in 2034 to today and result in millions of people going bankrupt anyway. But how would we do this? Well, I'm going to give you a very simple model, although the exact numbers and the specifics would have to be curated over the course of a national discussion to get right. A simple model would be anyone aged 60 or older would get Social Security just like they are right now, no differences. People between the ages of 50 and 59, though, would be told that when they retire, they'll get a reduced Social Security payout, potentially 80%. People 40 to 49 will get yet still a smaller Social Security payout. But how would we compensate that? Because as this stands, it would just hurt workers and keep retirees as they are. Well, the idea would be, instead of keeping the current tax rate where it is forever, the tax rate for Social Security would begin to decline, and eventually it would go down to 0, allowing people to get more money today that they can choose how to spend, and ideally that they would invest it, over having people being forced to contribute money that they can't afford to now for a Social Security program that they're worried they'll never get. Again, this option is complicated, but it does exist and it has to be mentioned. Now, it should be clear that something has to be done. So the question is, what do we do? I cannot answer that for this country, but I can share my opinion with you. In my personal opinion, I think we should do away with the $168,600 cap. I understand how this can hurt people and how it hurts people who are already paying a great deal in taxes. But that said, if we have to choose a painful option, that is something I am more comfortable doing than asking current retirees to see their benefits cut or asking that the general tax rate be raised even higher on workers who cannot afford to give more in taxes. Now, if you made it this far, you probably agree with me that America is at a crossroads, but we are at a crossroad for more than one reason. Social Security is not the only under-discussed issue that needs to be brought into the national consciousness and that needs to have fair and objective perspectives provided on it. And if you want to see content like that, then please subscribe and I'll keep making videos exactly like it. And if you want to see another video, another one discussing something really under-discussed, but maybe just as important as Social Security, then I recommend that you watch that video here. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.